Hello, malt mates. Welcome to the Whisky Bothy. Welcome to Ralphie Review 1081. And I'm just running a little mini series at the moment on whiskies that are bought at auction. There's a very simple reason for doing this. At the moment, especially across Europe, there are more and more whisky aficionados looking to pick up bargains at the auction sites, primarily and particularly the online auction sites. Excuse me, I've got a little visitor. Hello, little Fluffy. Do you want your treats? Okay. Well, thank you. And there you go. Arrived and gone in less than 3 seconds. Just the way we like it. Because of the growing interest in auctions, we need to be aware that there is treasure to be found, but there's also some of yesteryear's not so good whiskies. In fact, there's quite a lot of them to be found at auction. They're old, they're dusty, they're a little bit fossilised, and they're not particularly interesting. Now, one of the reasons, before I go into, I'll pour myself a wee dram and let it oxidise a little bit before I introduce this one. My next review extras, 1081 extras, will be a little bit additional forensics on individual bottles from auction, because it really pays to do your homework in this. You can end up with either fakes, or you can end up getting into a bidding war and paying far too much for what the whisky's actually worth. And also, in particular, when you hear online conversations about people bragging and telling you about the great whiskies they've bought at auction, including myself, because it featured in my last review, which was Bailey Nickel Jarvie, which is an absolute classic old school blended Scotch. Really interesting, authentic stuff. From Glenmorangie, nonetheless. But there is this narrative going about that whisky was better in the old days because the people were doing it manually. In fact, every distillery out there was a virtual Springbank. That puts it neatly into context, actually. And that you had the old guys in their bonnets, in these black and white films, rolling the barrels down the yard and, taking their time and all the rest of it. And it's a very condensed, naive perspective. In the old days, a lot of bad whisky was made. It's one reason why whisky became so unpopular in the 1980s that over 30 distilleries were either mothballed temporarily or shut down completely and put beyond recovery. Because people were not interested in whisky. They relegated it as an old man's drink, and specifically they were relegating the blends, not the malts. But in the old days, not a lot of people had the sophisticated palate to actually enjoy malts and get the most out of them. I'm not being judgmental, I'm simply observing what historically actually happened. And I'll tell you something else in passing, just while we're on the subject. Don't presume that in the old days there was much interest in old, matured whisky, the 18, 21, 25, 30. There is no way, just not long ago, a few decades ago, that people would dream of paying the price that distilleries are now asking for the product. It was unthinkable. And even now, I cannot believe the prices. In fact, something I'm discussing shortly with my Patreon subscribers in their weekly update. But anyway, let's just home in on this as a really good working example of why you need to do your homework and you need to do your background checks before you go on bidding on whisky. This cost me, £30-40. I probably overpaid. But I bought it because it was an authentic, original, historical bottle of Scotch whisky. The clue is on the label. Let me read it out to you. It's an old-fashioned, slightly glossy label, lots of gold and sort of black and whites. And back in the 1970s, and this is a mid-1970s bottle, this would be considered quite classy and showy. And again, at this point, it's kind of declaring an older age statement, because 12 years old was quite something in the 1970s. And it's got the dark look, and of course people are buying with their eyes. So they think, oh, must have a great flavour because it's a great colour. However, before we go any further, there's the inside of a screw top. That's how well screw tops work. All you have to do is now and again, if you have screw tops on bottles in your collection, is give them a little clockwise turn, very slight clockwise turn, because over time the air pressure rising and falling will cause a screw top to work slightly loose. Never worry about screw tops unless the inside seal is all browned and stained. That means that the whiskey has been on its side and the solvent in the alcohol has gone in and dissolved the glue holding the plastic card seal inside the screw tab, the screw on. When this will really, really badly taint a whiskey. So it's a risk you take when you're buying any whiskey that's got a screw top. It needs to be absolutely stored upright and not allowed to be lying even for a few months on its side. That's very risky. Another thing I'd like to bring to your attention is that this is 86 proof, 43 GI, right? And it's 26 2/3 fluid ounces. This gives you a very valuable clue as to what age it comes from, because imperial units of measurement were used right up to the late 1970s in the UK, in Britain, and then it was changed over to the European metric system of centilitres. So it gives you an idea of what age this whiskey is, and this whiskey, just for the record, is approximately 50 years old. I was going to say 25, I don't know why. This is about 55 years old. Yeah, 55 years old in the bottle. So you're thinking to yourself, right, if it's 1975 and it's 12 years old, so we're going back to 1962, right, 63, and so it's a post-war, so the sherry casks will be good, and it'll be really good quality because it's Ben Nevis, right? And it's saying it's a liqueur, a fine old Scotch whisky. It doesn't say it's a single malt. It says it's a rare liqueur whisky over 12 years old. This is kind of a little bit cryptic, and I want to give you some infill, but I'll be doing that in the next review. Now is the time. I've let it oxidise. Now's the time to smell and taste this auction-bought antiquity so that it becomes part of the record online, showing an opinion and perspective on antique, vintage from auction whiskies, for which there will be more interest in the future. Good start. Resinous, aromatic, cola, red cola. Red cola's a British thing, by the way. It's like strawberry Coca-Cola type thingy, vaguely, something like that. Fruitcake, loads of fruitcake, lots and lots of fruitcake. Big sherry overcoat, massive sherry overcoat. And of course, it's bonded and blended very well in with the whisky itself, which it doesn't state is a single malt and may well be a blended Scotch whisky, specifically and exclusively from Ben Nevis Distillery, because in the 1970s they did this. It was called Dew of Ben Nevis. It's one of the rare examples where a single malt distillery produces its own grain whisky, mixed mash bill whisky, in-house, blends it with its own malt, puts it into cask for maturation, and then bottles it as a variant of the single malt. Highly unusual. Oh, wonderful. Excuse me, I've got a cat hair on my nose and it's tickling my nose every time I put the glass. Excuse me, that's better. Resinous, dark cherry, malty, scorched vanilla. Taste. Good arrival, great arrival. Big, rich, powerful, zesty, super sherry overcoat. And then it rapidly falls apart on the palate. The arrival is great. The finish, it arrives with a roar and finishes with a whimper. The development is very short-lived. It fades fast, and it gets a little hot. It gets a little hot because the whisky has been badly made. It's a bit rough. They have been boiling the stills too fast and too hard to churn the liquor out. The result is you get hot liquor. I'm detecting distinct notes of hot liquor in this whisky. I've added some water now. Let's go back and recheck. The nose is still great. Wonderful nose. Big, full, yeah. Same as before, same as when it was neat. Big sherry overcoat, resinous, aromatic, and loads of fruitcake. The arrival, a little bit longer now. Decent arrival, but then it gets sulphury and sour, and the bitterness completely takes over, and then it falls completely to pieces. I'll tell you what's going on here. This distillery wasn't having a very, excuse me, I need a glass of water. Very good to have these in hand. I'm going to turn this whisky into liqueur. I'm going to add rosehip juice to it, rosehip syrup, or perhaps some honey. I'll turn it into a liqueur and I'll leave it in the bottle for several years and let it blend up. At the moment, for an experienced palate, it's not particularly drinkable, despite the fact that first impressions when I first opened the bottle were distinctly impressive, which is why when we come to whiskies we never go on first impressions. It just doesn't work. It's a real challenge actually for those who are judging in whisky competitions when they have to take one take of a whisky and then grade it and mark it. It's proof that the good old days weren't that good. This is a distillery that would be struggling to sell its product, and it's probably the quality of what they bottled then which has haunted the distillery to this day, which is now owned by a Japanese distillery company, Nikka, and most of the product, which I would say is generally better quality than this, is going over to be put into Japanese whisky to give it some more flavour to help justify the absurdly, ridiculously, stupidly high price that some suckers are prepared to pay for Japanese whisky. It really is overrated. And a lot of Japanese whisky is good. Some of it is very, very good, but not the price. Marks. $74 out of 100. There you go. And yeah, if I say it so myself, very well earned. Let this review be a cautionary lesson to you, malt mates. that in the fever and the froth of all the positives that are coming out from people buying very successfully at auction, getting hold of yesteryear's whisky, the quality of which is not necessarily available in today's bottlings, and we're seeing that for sure. Not all these old bottles are good bottles. This isn't worth more than £20. And yet you will see bottles of this on sale in specialist, high-end retailers for hundreds of dollars. Do not pay it. Don't make a fool of yourself. And I'll see you shortly for Ralphie Review 1081, in which I'll be going into the forensics of this bottle. See you there. Bye-bye.